We all heard stories of parents doing their absolute best to raise a child, right? Trying to keep them away from the streets, but failing because of the child's own choices. But what if I told you that Bloodhound Lil Jeff's parents didn't just fail to keep him from the streets? They literally raised him to be the streets. What if I told you his family didn't just enable his path to becoming one of Chicago's most feared killers? They celebrated it, encouraged it, and turned murder into a family business.
I'm taking just a killing school. Class start next week. You gotta at least have 2 bodies.
In 2024, Jeffrey Harris, known as Bloodhound Lil Jeff, was gunned down in Chicago while attempting what would be his final drill. But this ain't just another story about a young man lost to street violence. This is the disturbing story of how an entire family systematically created a damn demon, and how that demon's reign of terror was exactly what they wanted all along. By the end of this video, you're gonna understand how the Harris family turned their son into a killing machine, celebrated his murders, and even after his death, continued to glorify the violence that defined his short life. Stay until the end, because what his father posted after Jeff's death will show you just how deep this family's sickness really goes. The family operated out of Chicago's South Side, where respect is earned through fear and violence is just another form of communication. But what made the Harris family different wasn't just their involvement in street life. It was how they treated that life like a legacy to be passed down like some twisted family tradition. Jeff's mother wasn't just complicit in this lifestyle, she was an active participant. While most mothers pray their sons stay away from violence, she would literally text Jeff congratulating him on successful hits. This wasn't a case of parents losing control of their child. This was a case of parents molding their child into exactly what they wanted him to become.
Niggas be out here, damn, got y'all mama crying and shit, man. That's the boat. That shit. Ain't right wrong. That's the most that you could do to OG in the world.
The Bloodhound gang that Jeff would eventually join wasn't some random crew he fell into. It was a family operation with his older brother Jay Boogie already established as a key member. This was generational street politics, where being a Harris meant being a killer, and being a killer meant making the family proud. Jeff's father came up in Chicago during the crack epidemic of the 80s and 90s, when the city was literally a war zone. He earned his stripes during some of the most violent periods in Chicago's history, building a reputation that would follow him for decades. On the streets, respect for the Harris name wasn't just given, it was enforced through violence. The elder Harris wasn't just some small-time dealer or gang member. He was connected to major players in Chicago's criminal hierarchy, moving significant weight and controlling territory that other crews could only dream of accessing. His reputation was built on a foundation of bodies, rivals who had challenged him and lost permanently. During the height of the crack wars, Jeff's father was involved in multiple gang conflicts that left dozens dead. He survived shootouts that claimed the lives of many of his contemporaries.
MPD released this footage today. It shows 3 men running and shooting toward the victim right before police were called.
Earning a reputation for being both smart and ruthless. The streets knew that crossing the Harris family meant signing your own death warrant. His mother's background was equally rooted in street culture, but her story was even more complex. She came from a family of hustlers and killers on the West Side, where women were expected to be just as hard as the men. Her own brothers were notorious in their neighborhoods, and she grew up understanding that violence was just another tool for solving problems. When Jeff's parents met in the mid-90s, it wasn't some romantic fairy tale. They were introduced through mutual criminal associates who thought their combined connections could be profitable. Their relationship was built on shared values, money, respect, and the willingness to eliminate anyone who threatened either. Their courtship involved planning robberies together, with Jeff's mother serving as both lookout and getaway driver. She wasn't some innocent woman who got swept up in her man's lifestyle. She was an active participant who brought her own criminal skills to the relationship. They had Jeffrey in the late 1990s, right in the middle of their prime street years. From day one, little Jeff wasn't raised with normal childhood expectations. While other kids were learning ABCs, Jeff was learning street codes. While other parents were teaching their children to avoid conflict, the Harris family was teaching Jeff that conflict was how you earned respect. The household operated like a criminal enterprise. Conversations at the dinner table weren't about school or sports. They were about territory, rivals, and respect. Jeff grew up hearing stories about his father's exploits like other kids heard bedtime stories. Violence wasn't something to be avoided in the Harris household. It was something to aspire to. By the time Jeff was old enough to understand what his family really did, he had already internalized their values completely. The streets weren't something he fell into. They were his inheritance, passed down through generations of Harris family criminality. Growing up in the Harris household meant Jeff's education started early, but it wasn't the kind of education most parents provide. While other kids were learning right from wrong, Jeff was learning how to move in the streets without getting caught. His parents didn't shield him from their lifestyle, they made him a student of it. Jeff's father would take him on rides through different neighborhoods, pointing out territories, explaining beefs, and teaching him how to read the streets. These weren't casual drives. They were lessons in survival and dominance. Jeff learned to identify rival gang members before he learned to ride a bike properly. These educational tours were comprehensive and systematic. His father would explain the history of different blocks, who controlled what territory, and why certain areas were off limits. Jeff learned about the economics of the drug trade, the politics of gang alliances, and the importance of maintaining respect through fear. His mother played her part too, teaching Jeff how to talk to police, how to keep his mouth shut, and how to never show weakness. She would drill him on street codes like other mothers drill their kids on multiplication tables. In the Harris household, snitching was worse than murder, and showing fear was worse than dying. The family's lessons weren't just theoretical.
I feel if I get mad enough, the shit will start happening. I went black for like a week, and poof. Gotta go after that one. Poof.
They would create scenarios where Jeff had to demonstrate what he had learned. His father would have associates approach Jeff to test whether he would reveal family business. His mother would quiz him on proper responses to police questioning. Jeff's education also included practical skills that most children never learn. He was taught how to handle weapons safely, how to plan escape routes, and how to read people's intentions through their body language. These weren't skills for a normal childhood, they were preparation for a life of crime. The family's reputation meant Jeff grew up with a target on his back, but also with protection. Other kids knew not to mess with him because of who his father was. This gave Jeff a sense of power and entitlement that would shape his entire worldview. He learned early that the Harris name carried weight, and that weight came from violence. But Jeff wasn't just absorbing these lessons passively. His parents actively tested him, putting him in situations where he had to prove he understood what they were teaching him. They wanted to make sure their son wouldn't just carry the family name, he would live up to it. By elementary school, Jeff was already displaying the characteristics his parents wanted to see. He was fearless in confrontations with other children, never backed down from fights, and showed no remorse when he hurt someone. His teachers saw these as warning signs, but his parents saw them as proof their training was working. The family celebrated Jeff's aggressive behavior at school. When he got suspended for fighting, they took him out for dinner. When he intimidated other children, they praised his dominance. They were systematically reinforcing every violent tendency while discouraging any signs of empathy or compassion. By the time Jeff was a teenager, he had already been shaped into exactly what his parents wanted, a young man who saw violence as normal, respect as everything, and fear as weakness. The foundation for Bloodhound Lil Jeff had been laid through years of careful, deliberate conditioning. Despite everything his family had taught him, Jeff still had moments where he dreamed of a different life. Basketball became his escape, the one thing that made him feel like he could be something other than what his family expected. He was actually talented too. Quick, athletic, with good court vision and natural instincts for the game. For a brief period during middle school and early high school, Jeff genuinely believed he could make it to the NBA. He would spend hours practicing at local courts, dreaming of getting out of Chicago through basketball. It was probably the only time in his life when he imagined a future that didn't involve violence. Jeff's basketball skills were legitimate. He could handle the ball well, had a decent shot, and understood the game at a level that impressed his coaches. Several of his teachers and coaches saw basketball as Jeff's ticket to a better life and encouraged him to focus on academics to maintain his eligibility. But his parents saw these dreams differently. To them, Jeff's basketball aspirations weren't admirable. They were goofy. They had raised him to be a street legend, not some athlete chasing a ball around. When Jeff would talk about making the varsity team or getting a scholarship, his father would laugh and tell him to focus on real life. The family's attitude toward Jeff's basketball dreams revealed everything about their values. They didn't want their son to escape the streets. They wanted him to dominate them. Success to the Harris family wasn't measured in touchdowns or trophies. It was measured in fear and respect. Jeff's mother was particularly hostile to his basketball ambitions. She would schedule family business during his practice times, forcing him to choose between basketball and family loyalty. She would also criticize him for spending time on kid games when he could be learning skills that would actually matter in the real world. The family's sabotage of Jeff's basketball dreams was subtle but effective. They would create conflicts that forced him to miss practices, discourage him from forming relationships with teammates, and constantly remind him that basketball was a distraction from his real destiny. When Jeff failed to make the varsity team his sophomore year, it crushed him. The rejection was particularly painful because he had genuinely believed basketball could be his way out. But instead of encouraging him to keep trying or find other positive outlets, his family saw it as confirmation that he was meant for the streets. His father's response to Jeff's basketball failure was telling. He told Jeff it was time to stop playing games and start building his real reputation. He said the Harris name meant something in the streets, and it was time for Jeff to start living up to that legacy. His mother was even more direct. She told Jeff that basketball was for kids who didn't have what it takes to be real players in the streets. She said the Harris name meant something, and it was time for Jeff to start living up to it. She reminded him that his family had invested years in preparing him for street life, and basketball was just a distraction from his true calling. The failure to make varsity became the turning point where Jeff fully embraced what his family had always wanted him to become. His dreams of the NBA died, and his transformation into Bloodhound Lil Jeff began. The family had successfully eliminated the last obstacle to their son's criminal destiny. Jeff's older brother, Jay Boogie, was already deep in the streets when Jeff's basketball dreams collapsed. Jay Boogie had followed the family path perfectly. He was respected, feared, and making serious money through violence and intimidation. To Jeff, his older brother represented everything he was supposed to become. Jay Boogie wasn't just Jeff's brother, he became his mentor in street life. While their parents had laid the foundation, Jay Boogie provided the practical education. He taught Jeff how to move, how to think, and how to survive in Chicago's most dangerous neighborhoods. The relationship between the brothers was complex but crucial to Jeff's development. Jay Boogie genuinely loved Jeff, but his version of love meant preparing his little brother for a life of violence. He would tell Jeff stories about his own exploits, not to scare him away from the streets, but to show him what success looked like in their world. Jay Boogie's street resume was impressive, even by Chicago standards. He had been involved in multiple shootings. Jeff's older brother, Jay Boogie, was already deep in the streets when Jeff's basketball dreams collapsed. Jay Boogie had followed the family path perfectly. He was respected, feared, and making serious money through violence and intimidation. To Jeff, his older brother represented everything he was supposed to become. Jay Boogie wasn't just Jeff's brother, he became his mentor in street life. While their parents had laid the foundation, Jay Boogie provided the practical education. He taught Jeff how to move, how to think, and how to survive in Chicago's most dangerous neighborhoods. The relationship between the brothers was complex but crucial to Jeff's development. Jay Boogie genuinely loved Jeff, but his version of love meant preparing his little brother for a life of violence. He would tell Jeff stories about his own exploits, not to scare him away from the streets, but to show him what success looked like in their world. Jay Boogie's street resume was impressive, even by Chicago standards. He had been involved in multiple shootings, controlled significant drug territory, and had earned respect from older, more established criminals. His reputation opened doors that would have been closed to someone his age under normal circumstances. Under Jay Boogie's guidance, Jeff learned the practical skills he would need to survive and thrive in street life. How to handle weapons safely and effectively, how to plan operations with multiple contingencies, how to read situations and identify threats before they became deadly. Jay Boogie's teaching methods were hands-on and comprehensive. He would take Jeff on actual operations, gradually increasing his involvement and responsibility. Jeff started as a lookout, then became a driver, and eventually participated directly in violent confrontations. The brothers developed a bond that went beyond family. They became partners in violence. Jay Boogie saw Jeff's potential and was determined to help him reach it. He knew his little brother had the intelligence and ruthlessness to become something special in the streets. Jay Boogie also taught Jeff about the business side of street life. how to manage money, how to build and maintain a crew, how to form alliances and when to break them. These weren't just survival skills. They were leadership skills that would serve Jeff well as his reputation grew. Jeff looked up to J Boogie with a mixture of love and admiration that bordered on worship. Everything J Boogie did, Jeff wanted to do better. Every level of respect J Boogie achieved, Jeff wanted to surpass. This competitive dynamic between the brothers would drive Jeff to take increasingly extreme risks. J Boogie was already a key member of the Bloodhound gang, and he had big plans for his little brother. The gang wasn't just some random crew, it was becoming a family operation, with the Harris brothers positioned to be its future leaders. The mentorship relationship between J Boogie and Jeff was crucial to Jeff's transformation. Without his brother's guidance and protection, Jeff might have made fatal mistakes early in his criminal career. J Boogie's experience and connections gave Jeff a significant advantage over other young criminals trying to make their mark. The Bloodhound gang didn't start as some massive criminal organization. It began as a small crew of young men from the same neighborhood who were tired of being pushed around by older, more established gangs. What made Bloodhound different from the beginning was their willingness to be more violent than anyone else. The gang formed in the early 2000s when Chicago's gang landscape was shifting dramatically. Traditional gang structures were breaking down due to police pressure and internal conflicts, and smaller, more aggressive crews were carving out their own territories. Bloodhound positioned itself as the most ruthless of these new crews. The founding members of Bloodhound were all young men who had grown up together and shared similar backgrounds. They had all been involved in street life from an early age, but they were frustrated by their lack of opportunities in established gangs. They decided to create their own organization where merit was measured by violence rather than age or connections. J Boogie was one of the founding members, bringing the Harris family's reputation and connections to the group. His involvement gave Bloodhound immediate credibility and access to weapons, drugs, and territory that other new gangs couldn't obtain. The gang's name itself reflected their approach. They would hunt their enemies like bloodhounds, relentlessly tracking them down until they were eliminated. This wasn't just a catchy name, it was a philosophy that guided all of their operations. From the beginning, Bloodhound operated differently than other gangs. While most crews focused on drug dealing with violence as a side business, Bloodhound made violence their primary business. They would take contracts, settle disputes for money, and eliminate problems for other criminal organizations. The gang's structure was deliberately loose but effective. There were no formal ranks or elaborate hierarchies like in traditional gangs. Respect was earned through action, and action meant violence. The more bodies you caught, the more respect you earned. It was a simple system that attracted the most dangerous young men in Chicago. Bloodhound's territory was initially small but strategically located. They controlled several blocks that served as major drug trafficking routes, giving them leverage over larger gangs that needed to move product through their area. This geographic advantage allowed them to punch above their weight in gang politics. The gang's reputation for extreme violence spread quickly through Chicago's criminal community. Other crews learned that conflicts with Bloodhound wouldn't be resolved through negotiation or compromise. They would be settled through bloodshed. This reputation served as both a deterrent and a recruitment tool. When Jeff was ready to join, it wasn't really a question of whether he would be accepted. The Harris name guaranteed his entry, and J Boogie's sponsorship ensured he would be given opportunities to prove himself quickly. Jeff's initiation into Bloodhound wasn't some ceremonial ritual. It was practical. He had to participate in an operation that would demonstrate his commitment and capability. The gang needed to know that the youngest Harris brother was worthy of the family name and the Bloodhound reputation. Jeff's transition from disappointed basketball player to active gang member happened quickly and decisively. Once he made the decision to fully embrace the street life his family had prepared him for, there was no gradual adjustment period. He jumped in with both feet, eager to prove himself worthy of the Harris name and the Bloodhound reputation. His first role in Bloodhound was as a lookout and messenger, positions that might seem minor but were actually crucial training. Jeff learned how to read situations, identify threats, and communicate under pressure. These skills would serve him well as his responsibilities increased and the stakes got higher. Jeff's natural intelligence and his family's training made him exceptionally good at these early roles. He could spot police surveillance from blocks away, identify rival gang members in crowds, and relay complex information accurately under stress. His reliability in these positions earned him respect from older gang members. The gang's operations during this period were relatively small-scale but consistent. They were building their reputation through persistent violence rather than spectacular attacks. Jeff participated in beatings, intimidation campaigns, and small-scale robberies. Each successful operation built his confidence and his standing within the group. Jeff's first taste of real violence came during a dispute with a rival crew over drug territory. The conflict had been simmering for weeks, with both sides engaging in increasingly aggressive posturing. When shooting finally broke out, Jeff was ready and eager to participate. His performance during this first shootout impressed everyone involved. While other young gang members might have panicked or hesitated, Jeff remained calm and focused. He followed orders, maintained his position, and showed no fear even when bullets were flying around him. Jeff's parents watched his progress with obvious pride. They would ask him about his activities, offer advice based on their own criminal experience, and celebrate his successes. Other parents might have been horrified to learn their son was involved in violent crime. The Harris family treated it like Jeff was succeeding in school. His mother was particularly supportive, often giving Jeff money for weapons and equipment. She would also provide alibis when needed, lying to police about Jeff's whereabouts during investigations. Her support wasn't passive. She was an active participant in Jeff's criminal career. Jeff's father took a more hands-off approach, but his approval was clear and meaningful. He would introduce Jeff to other street figures as "my boy who's making moves." This kind of endorsement from a respected figure like Jeff's father opened doors and created opportunities that other young criminals couldn't access. The family support system allowed Jeff to take risks that other young gang members couldn't afford. He knew that if something went wrong, his family would protect him with money, connections, and alibis. This safety net made him bolder and more aggressive than his peers. Jeff's rapid advancement within Bloodhound was also due to his willingness to volunteer for dangerous assignments. While other members might hesitate when asked to participate in high-risk operations, Jeff always stepped forward. This eagerness to embrace danger impressed his superiors and accelerated his rise through the gang's informal hierarchy. As Jeff proved himself reliable in smaller operations, Bloodhound began giving him more responsibility and independence. His next step up was drug dealing, which required a different skill set than simple violence. Jeff had to learn how to manage inventory, handle money, and deal with customers while staying alert for police and rivals. Jeff approached drug dealing with the same intensity and intelligence he brought to everything else. He wasn't content to be a small-time corner dealer making pocket change. He wanted to build a real operation that would generate serious money and respect. His family connections helped him access better suppliers and more lucrative territories. The drug trade in Chicago during this period was incredibly violent and competitive. Dealers had to be ready to defend their territory at any moment, and Jeff's growing reputation for violence actually helped his business. Customers knew not to try to rob him, and competitors knew challenging him meant risking their lives. Jeff's approach to drug dealing was systematic and professional. He studied successful dealers, learned from their methods, and improved on their techniques. He understood that consistent quality and reliable service were just as important as the ability to defend territory through violence. His success in drug dealing wasn't just about making money. It was about proving he could handle complex operations that required planning, organization, and leadership skills. Jeff demonstrated all of these abilities while maintaining the ruthless edge that made him dangerous. Jeff's drug operation grew rapidly, expanding from a single corner to multiple locations across several blocks. He recruited younger kids to work for him, teaching them the same lessons his family had taught him about loyalty, violence, and respect. His family continued to support his activities enthusiastically. His mother helped him launder money through legitimate businesses, while his father provided strategic advice based on his own experience in the drug trade. They treated Jeff's drug dealing like a legitimate family business, discussing strategies and celebrating profits. The money Jeff made from drug dealing allowed him to upgrade his lifestyle and his equipment. He bought better weapons, nicer clothes, and a car that enhanced his reputation. But more importantly, the money gave him independence and the ability to fund his own operations. Jeff's success also attracted attention from law enforcement. Police began investigating his activities, but Jeff's family connections and street smarts helped him avoid serious consequences. He learned how to operate under surveillance and how to insulate himself from direct involvement in the most dangerous activities. But Jeff was already getting restless with drug dealing. While it was profitable and had enhanced his reputation, it wasn't exciting enough for someone with his appetite for violence and risk. He began looking for opportunities to combine his business activities with his love of conflict and confrontation. The transition from drug dealer to robber wasn't a big leap for Jeff. He had the skills, the connections, and the family support to take on bigger risks for bigger rewards. More importantly, robbery offered the kind of immediate violence and excitement that drug dealing couldn't provide. Jeff's move into robbery marked a significant escalation in his criminal career and his reputation for ruthlessness. While drug dealing required patience and business skills, robbery was pure violence and intimidation. It was also much more dangerous, with higher stakes and more immediate consequences for failure. Jeff didn't start with random street robberies that might target innocent civilians. He was smarter than that, focusing on other criminals, drug dealers, gang members, and anyone else who couldn't go to the police. This approach was more profitable and strategically sound, but it also created enemies who would remember his face and hold grudges. His robbery operations were carefully planned and professionally executed. Jeff would spend weeks studying potential targets, learning their routines, identifying their vulnerabilities, and planning escape routes. This methodical approach minimized risk while maximizing profits. Jeff's first major robbery targeted a mid-level drug dealer who operated outside of Bloodhound territory. The operation was a complete success. Jeff and his crew got away with several $1,000s in cash and a significant amount of drugs. More importantly, the robbery enhanced Jeff's reputation for being both smart and dangerous. Word of Jeff's robbery skills spread quickly through Chicago's criminal community. Other criminals began approaching him with information about potential targets, hoping to partner with him on operations. Jeff was selective about these partnerships, choosing only the most profitable and strategically advantageous opportunities. His most significant and controversial robbery operation targeted Trap City, a crew that had been Bloodhound's allies in several previous conflicts. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Jeff planned it carefully, studying their operations and identifying their vulnerabilities over several months. The decision to rob Trap City was controversial, even within Bloodhound. Some members argued that betraying allies would damage the gang's reputation and create unnecessary enemies. But Jeff convinced the leadership that the potential profits outweighed the risks, and that Trap City's weakness made them vulnerable to other crews anyway. The Trap City robbery was Jeff's most ambitious operation to date. The target was a major drug stash house that contained both money and product worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Jeff assembled a crew of Bloodhound's most trusted members and spent weeks planning every detail of the operation. The robbery itself was executed flawlessly. Jeff's crew overwhelmed the guards, secured the location, and escaped with everything of value before police or rival gang members could respond. The operation netted more money than any previous Bloodhound operation and established Jeff as one of the gang's most valuable members. But the long-term consequences of the Trap City robbery were severe and far-reaching. The betrayal destroyed the alliance between Bloodhound and Trap City, creating a new enemy and sparking a gang war that would claim multiple lives over the following months. Jeff's family supported the robbery despite its consequences. They saw it as evidence that Jeff was thinking big and taking the kind of risks that separated real players from wannabes. The fact that it created new enemies didn't concern them. It just meant more opportunities to prove their son's capabilities in violent conflict. The gang war that followed the Trap City robbery gave Jeff numerous opportunities to demonstrate his skills in violence and strategic thinking. He participated in multiple shootings, always with his family's encouragement and support. Each successful operation increased his reputation and his confidence. Jeff's first murder wasn't a random act of violence or a moment of passion. It was a calculated execution that demonstrated his complete transformation from disappointed teenager to cold-blooded killer. The victim was a member of a rival crew who had been marked for death as part of the ongoing gang war with Trap City. The planning for the murder took weeks and involved multiple Bloodhound members. Jeff studied his target's movements, identified the best location for the attack, and prepared multiple escape routes. This wasn't the work of an impulsive young man. It was the methodical approach of someone who had been trained for this moment his entire life. Jeff's target was a mid-level Trap City member who had been involved in retaliatory attacks against Bloodhound. The decision to kill him was both strategic and personal. His death would send a message to Trap City while also satisfying Jeff's desire for revenge. The murder took place on a quiet residential street where the victim felt safe. Jeff approached on foot, wearing dark clothing and a mask to avoid identification. When he was close enough, he drew his weapon and fired multiple shots, ensuring the target was dead before fleeing the scene. When Jeff finally pulled the trigger, he felt no hesitation or remorse. Years of family conditioning had prepared him for this moment perfectly. The victim's death wasn't a tragedy to Jeff. It was an achievement, proof that he had finally become what his family always wanted him to be. The immediate aftermath of the murder revealed everything about the Harris family's values and priorities. Instead of being horrified or concerned about their son becoming a killer, They celebrated. Jeff's mother hugged him and told him how proud she was. His father shook his hand and welcomed him to the ranks of real killers. J Boogie's reaction was particularly telling and significant for Jeff's future development. He didn't just congratulate Jeff, he began planning their next operation together. The murder wasn't an endpoint for the family, it was a beginning. Jeff had proven he could kill, and now they wanted to see how many more bodies he could catch. The family's celebration of Jeff's first murder wasn't private or subdued. They talked about it openly, treating it like any other family milestone. Jeff's mother would brag to her friends about her son's accomplishments. His father would introduce him to other criminals as someone who had proven himself in the most definitive way possible. This public celebration of murder showed how completely the Harris family had rejected normal moral boundaries. They weren't just tolerating Jeff's violence, they were proud of it, encouraging it, and using it to enhance their own reputations in the criminal community. The murder also marked Jeff's full acceptance into Bloodhound's inner circle. He was no longer a junior member learning the ropes. He was a proven killer who could be trusted with the gang's most sensitive operations. This new status came with increased responsibilities and opportunities. Jeff's first murder also had practical consequences for his criminal career. Word of the killing spread quickly through Chicago's gang community, enhancing both his personal reputation and Bloodhound's collective standing. Other crews began to take them more seriously as a threat. The success of his first murder gave Jeff confidence and a taste for killing that would drive his future actions. He had discovered that he was good at murder, and that it brought him the respect and recognition he craved. This realization would shape the rest of his short life. After his first murder, Jeff began using social media to document and celebrate his crimes in ways that shocked even Chicago's hardened criminal community. This wasn't just teenage bragging or seeking attention. It was a deliberate strategy to build his reputation and intimidate his enemies through digital psychological warfare. Jeff would go live on Instagram and Facebook shortly after committing murders, describing what he had done and how he had done it. These weren't vague hints or coded messages designed to avoid legal consequences. They were detailed confessions that left no doubt about his involvement. He treated murder like a performance art, with social media as his stage. His approach to social media was sophisticated and calculated. Jeff understood that in the modern street game, perception was as important as reality. By documenting his crimes online, he was creating a permanent record of his capabilities that would enhance his reputation long after the immediate impact of each murder had faded. Jeff's social media presence served multiple purposes simultaneously. It intimidated enemies, impressed potential allies, and satisfied his own need for recognition and respect. He was building a brand around his violence, turning murder into a form of entertainment for his followers. His family not only tolerated this behavior but actively encouraged it. They understood that Jeff's online presence was building the Harris family brand and enhancing their collective reputation in the criminal community. Every murder he documented online increased their influence and opened new opportunities. Jeff's mother was particularly active in supporting his social media activities. She would like and comment on his posts, often adding her own messages of pride and encouragement. Her public support for her son's murders showed the world that the entire Harris family stood behind his actions. The text messages between Jeff and his mother became legendary in Chicago's street circles and provided insight into the family's twisted dynamics. After one particularly brazen shooting that took place outside her house, she texted him expressing how proud she felt that her son's name was ringing in the streets. These messages, which Jeff proudly shared online, showed a mother celebrating her son's transformation into a killer. She wasn't concerned about his safety or the legal consequences of his actions. She was proud that he was living up to the family's criminal legacy. Jeff's social media presence also served a practical purpose in his criminal activities. By documenting his crimes, he was sending a message to potential enemies that he was fearless and willing to face consequences. This psychological warfare was as effective as actual violence in maintaining his reputation. The family's support for Jeff's online activities revealed their complete embrace of his criminal identity. They weren't trying to hide or minimize his actions, they were helping him broadcast them to the world. They wanted everyone to know what their son was capable of. Jeff's digital confessions also demonstrated his complete lack of fear regarding law enforcement. He was essentially daring police to arrest him, confident that his family's connections and his own street smarts would protect him from serious consequences. The online documentation of his crimes created a permanent record that would eventually be used against him. But Jeff didn't care about future consequences. He was focused on building his reputation in the present, regardless of the long-term costs. As Jeff's reputation grew beyond Chicago's borders, he began receiving offers to work in other cities where his skills were in demand. Milwaukee drug dealers and gang members had heard about his capabilities and were willing to pay premium prices for his services. This marked Jeff's evolution from local gang member to professional killer. The Milwaukee operations represented a significant step up in both complexity and profitability. These weren't personal beefs or territory disputes driven by emotion. They were business transactions where Jeff was being hired to solve problems for people who could afford to pay for permanent solutions. Jeff's first Milwaukee contract came through connections his father had established during his own criminal career. A drug dealer in Milwaukee was having problems with people who owed him money, and traditional collection methods weren't working. He needed someone with Jeff's reputation to send a message that would ensure future payments. Jeff accepted the contract and began planning the operation with the same methodical approach he used for his Chicago activities. He traveled to Milwaukee, studied the targets, learned their routines, and identified the optimal time and location for the attack. His family saw these paid hits as evidence of Jeff's success and the Harris family's growing influence. He was no longer just representing their name in Chicago, he was taking their reputation national. The fact that people in other cities were willing to pay for his services proved that he had achieved something special. Jeff's approach to the Milwaukee hits was professional and efficient. He would travel to the city, complete his assignment, and return to Chicago before anyone could connect him to the crime. These operations required careful planning and precise execution, skills that Jeff had developed through years of family training and street experience. The most famous of Jeff's Milwaukee operations was a triple murder commissioned by a local rapper who was also a drug dealer. The rapper had people who owed him significant money, and he wanted to make an example that would ensure future compliance with his business arrangements. Jeff accepted the contract and began planning what would become one of his most notorious operations. When Jeff executed the triple murder, it was with the same cold efficiency he had developed in Chicago. 3 people died in a matter of minutes, and Jeff disappeared before police arrived. The operation was so clean and professional that it enhanced his reputation throughout the Midwest. The success of the Milwaukee operations brought Jeff significant money and respect, but it also increased the risks he faced. Law enforcement agencies in multiple cities were now investigating his activities, and rival criminals were beginning to see him as a threat that needed to be eliminated. Jeff's family continued to support his Milwaukee activities, seeing them as proof that their son had achieved the kind of success they had always envisioned. They weren't concerned about the increased risks. They were proud that Jeff was operating at such a high level. Jeff's final operation wasn't in Milwaukee as many people assumed. It was back home in Chicago, where his criminal career had begun. In 2024, Jeff was attempting what would be his last hit when everything went wrong. Whether it was bad intelligence, improved security by his targets, or just bad luck, Jeff walked into a situation he couldn't control. The details of Jeff's final moments reveal both his skills and his limitations as a killer. He had successfully approached the target location and was in position to complete his mission when he was discovered by security. Instead of retreating and trying again later, Jeff chose to fight, demonstrating the fearlessness his family had instilled in him. The gunfight that followed was brief but intense. Jeff managed to wound several of his attackers, proving that even in his final moments, he remained dangerous and capable. But he was outnumbered and outgunned, and his luck finally ran out on the streets that had made him famous. Jeff's death in Chicago was particularly significant because it happened in the city where he had built his reputation. He died on the same streets where he had committed his first murder, where he had learned to be a killer, and where his family had shaped him into the monster he became. When news of Jeff's death reached his family, their reaction was immediate and telling. Instead of grief or regret, they expressed pride in how he had died. To them, Jeff hadn't failed. He had died like a warrior, fighting to the end against overwhelming odds. The circumstances of Jeff's death also revealed the inevitable consequences of the lifestyle his family had chosen for him. He died young, violently, and far from achieving any of the legitimate success he might have found through basketball or other positive pursuits. Jeff's death sent shockwaves through Chicago's criminal community. He had been seen as nearly invincible, someone who could handle any situation through violence and cunning. His death proved that even the most dangerous killers were mortal and vulnerable. The location of Jeff's death, back in Chicago rather than Milwaukee, was symbolic. Despite his success in other cities, he was ultimately a product of Chicago's streets, and those streets claimed him in the end. The Harris family's response to Jeff's death was unlike anything seen in Chicago's street culture. While most families mourn their lost children and call for an end to violence, the Harris family doubled down on their celebration of Jeff's criminal career and the circumstances of his death. Jeff's father became particularly active on social media, posting multiple messages that glorified his son's life and death. He shared photos of Jeff with weapons, recounted stories of his murders, and promised that the family's war against their enemies would continue even without Jeff. His most infamous post came shortly after Jeff's death when he wrote something along the lines of, "Y'all didn't get him, he came to get y'all, and what happened happened, the saga continues." This message revealed everything about the family's twisted values and their complete disconnection from normal human emotions. Jeff's father's posts also revealed his pride in what he saw as Jeff's warrior's death. Instead of mourning the loss of his son's potential or regretting the choices that led to this outcome, he was bragging about an unsuccessful drill and seemed genuinely proud of the way Jeff had gone out. His mother's response was equally disturbing and revealing. She posted messages about how proud she was of the man Jeff had become and how his name would live forever in the streets. She treated his death like the conclusion of a successful career rather than a tragedy that had destroyed their family. The family's public celebration of Jeff's death sent shockwaves through Chicago's criminal community. Even in a culture that often glorifies violence, the Harris family's response was seen as extreme and inappropriate. They weren't just accepting their son's death, they were celebrating it as the perfect ending to his story. J Boogie's response was more subdued but equally telling. He posted messages promising to continue his brother's work and ensure that Jeff's enemies would pay for his death. The family wasn't planning to retreat or seek peace, they were planning revenge and continuation of the cycle of violence. The family's response also revealed their complete investment in Jeff's criminal identity. They had spent years building him into a killer, and they weren't going to let his death diminish that achievement. To them, Jeff had died exactly as he should have, violently and without compromise. This reaction showed that the Harris family's corruption went beyond simply enabling Jeff's crimes. They had become so invested in his criminal success that they couldn't imagine any other outcome for his life. His death wasn't a failure to them. It was the inevitable and appropriate conclusion to the story they had written for him. The family's continued glorification of Jeff's violence, even after his death, demonstrated that they had learned nothing from the tragedy they had created. Instead of recognizing their role in destroying their son's life, they were using his death to enhance their own reputations and continue the cycle of violence. The story of Bloodhound Lil Jeff and the Harris family represents something unique and disturbing in the annals of American crime. This wasn't a case of a good family losing a child to the streets despite their best efforts. This was a case of a family systematically creating a monster and then celebrating that monster's reign of terror until his inevitable violent death. Jeff's transformation from a basketball-loving teenager to a cold-blooded killer didn't happen despite his family's influence. It happened because of it. Every step of his criminal evolution was supported, encouraged, and celebrated by the people who should have been protecting him from that life and guiding him towards something better. The Harris family's approach to raising Jeff reveals a complete inversion of normal parental values and responsibilities. Where most parents try to instill empathy and compassion, they taught ruthlessness and violence. Where most parents discourage criminal behavior, they demanded it. Where most parents hope their children will be better than they were, the Harris family ensured Jeff would be worse. Jeff's story also demonstrates the devastating power of family influence in shaping criminal behavior. He didn't become a killer because of peer pressure, environmental factors, or personal choices made in isolation. He became a killer because his family trained him to be one from childhood, systematically eliminating every other possibility for his life. The family's celebration of Jeff's crimes and death shows how completely they had embraced criminal values over human values. They weren't conflicted about their son's choices, they were proud of them. They didn't see his violence as a problem to be solved. They saw it as an achievement to be celebrated and a legacy to be continued. Jeff's legacy in Chicago's streets is exactly what his family wanted it to be. He's remembered as one of the most feared killers of his generation, someone who never showed mercy and never backed down from violence. To the Harris family, this reputation represents their greatest achievement as parents. The family's response to Jeff's death proves that they view his story as a success rather than a tragedy. They created exactly the kind of son they wanted. a killer who would enhance their reputation and carry on their criminal legacy. The fact that this choice ultimately cost Jeff his life doesn't seem to concern them. Jeff's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of evil and the role of family in creating or preventing it. Evil isn't always something that emerges despite good influences. Sometimes it's something that's deliberately cultivated by people who should know better. The Harris family's systematic creation of a killer represents one of the most disturbing examples of parental failure in modern American crime. They didn't just fail to prevent their son from becoming a criminal, they actively worked to ensure he would become the most dangerous criminal possible. The story of Bloodhound Lil Jeff and the Harris family forces us to confront the devastating consequences of completely abandoning moral boundaries in favor of criminal success. Jeff's death at 21 years old was the inevitable conclusion of a life that had been shaped by violence from the very beginning. Jeff died exactly as his family had prepared him to die, violently, young, and without the possibility of redemption or change. He never had the opportunity to become anything other than what his family made him because they had systematically eliminated every other path his life could have taken. The family's response to his death proves that they learned nothing from the tragedy they had created. Instead of recognizing their role in destroying their son's life and potential, they celebrated his death as the successful conclusion of their criminal project. The Harris family's story serves as a warning about the power of family influence and the consequences of choosing criminal values over human values. They created a monster, unleashed that monster on the world, and then celebrated when the monster was finally destroyed by the same violence they had taught him to embrace. Jeff's story didn't have to end this way. With different parents, different values, and different choices, he could have been the NBA player he once dreamed of becoming. Instead, he became exactly what his family wanted him to be, a killer who died young and violent, leaving behind only a legacy of fear and destruction. The true tragedy of Bloodhound Lil Jeff isn't just that he died at 21. The true tragedy is that he never had a chance to be anything other than what his family made him. From the day he was born, his fate was sealed by people who confused love with corruption and success with violence. In the end, the Harris family got exactly what they wanted. A son who would be remembered in the streets forever. They just had to sacrifice his life, his future, and his soul to get it. And based on their response to his death, they consider that a fair trade. The saga continues, as Jeff's father promised. But it's not a saga of triumph or success. It's a saga of a family that chose evil and paid the ultimate price for that choice. Jeff's death wasn't the end of their story, but it was the inevitable conclusion of the path they chose for him from the beginning.